I had had enough of all my psychosis. I couldn't take it no longer. What had started off as a whimsical way to kill people had begun to kill what lay inside me. I had used various different means to infiltrate areas I could never normally do, and had found each one to be as bad as the other. So much so my head hurt with the amount of confusion I felt, as if the situation gave answers that this man with his little brain could not compute. I didn't expect that each person I became to be hated by the other. When I was a manager, the workers hated me. When I was a worker, we hated the managers. When I was an agency worker, the permanents hated, and vice versa. When I was a tramp, everyone hated me. I could no longer remember in my different guises which person I was addressing. I barely knew who I was. It was ironic. I'd taken on more personalities only to find I was losing my grip of myself, of my reality. So now I would end this horrible tale that I had created. No longer would I live in secret. I threw all my disguise into the river and grappled within my hand, ready to follow my murky past. Was the flask that contained enough contaminants to wipe the scourge of mankind off the map of the world? I pondered for a while, reflecting over my poor existence, that I had come to this ultimate and unsatisfactory end. In the end, my pain by killing in one final go as many as one could. I would be a man of genocide, of the human race, such a grand title for such a small man. Yet it was unsatisfactory, as it left no resolution to the unsolved pain that I felt. The reason behind why I had to leave this life of crime, why I had partaken to enjoy such killings. I had felt no remorse, even for the millions I would kill, the terrible inevitable death that all would endure. Men, women, children, all the same. What kind of a man could kill with so little effort, so little conscience or pain? What kind of a man could listen to the pain of his own doing and feel nothing whilst wallow in his own miserable misfortune? What kind of a man could know all this about himself and still make no change or any kind of move towards it? I sat staring into the river, watching endless water flowing, when I recalled my anger early today. From returning home flustered, unable to hold a coherent thought in my head, not knowing who or what I was. I came home not sure whether or not I had killed even one person, let alone more. I couldn't remember. Was I a killer or not? Was it all imaginary? It felt as if I killed in my nightmares to awake thinking it real. Yet my horrible thoughts were confirmed when I started to scratch at the walls of my one-roomed house. The paper and cement quickly fell, as if it had only been up for a little while. Behind it, encased in between the walls and cement mixture, was a human hand. I pulled more cement away until one side of the wall slid away and revealed 10 bodies, their faces screaming with agony, yet long dead, just their skeletal remains. Then I started on another wall, and I pulled it down, scraped it away, and found more bodies, this time still wearing clothes and more flesh than the previous ones. How many people had I killed? I pulled the floorboards up, and there underneath, staring upwards, were more skeletal remains. I pulled at my head, and by this time was yelling and screaming as I continued to pull up more floorboards till there was no more, and each square inch of it was covered with bodies, some intact, some apart, heads looking up at me, their jaws wide open, their eyes missing. I pulled down the remaining 2 walls, and behind those 2 were dead bodies, all around me in the house where I had lived and slept. Each contained the corporeal remains of those I had slaughtered. My home was a graveyard, and I was its guard. My reflections were interrupted with a gang of youths as they ran past me, chasing one who hid behind a bush next to me. He was as scared as a rat. He must have been at least 20. I felt the urge to kill him. Would he be my last victim? And I had a fitting way to end this scared rat's life. I pulled him out of the bushes and positioned him in front of me. Directly behind him lay the river, bubbling away. I placed my hand on his chest, about to push him, when his puppy dog eyes looked into mine, and he said, "Don't push. Don't push." But his eyes meant nothing to me. I had killed so many eyes in my time. There was nothing he could convey that would stop me now. I removed my hand, and he smiled, taking some victory in my answering his plea. But instead, I lifted him up with both of my hands and threw him into the river. He screamed with agony. His face went bright red and blistery, for it was no ordinary river any more. Before I had pulled him out of the bushes, I crushed the contents of the glass jar into the river, emptied the chemical poison. And he would be the first of many who would die. I watched him writhe and scream in agony, shouting and screaming as he almost melted away in front of me, leaving behind his skeletal remains until they too melted and sank deep within the river. The last bubble burst on the top of the service, and with that I jumped as high as I could, and I seemed to float through the air for ages, and landed with a thud into the swirling water. My mouth wide open, I sank deeper and deeper, the dark waters engulfing me. As I did so, I noticed I could breathe. I was swallowing water without difficulty. I looked around me, and it no longer looked like a river, but there was water. I could feel walls soft to my side. I kicked one side, and it melded with my foot. Then I looked at my hand. Something strange had happened. It wasn't my hand. It wasn't my arm or leg. Then I heard a voice, my voice, speaking to me. I couldn't tell whether it was within the waters or within me, but the voice told me not to worry, that I was experiencing the pangs of the creation of consciousness. Then I looked at my hand, so tiny and small, and I realized who I was. I was a baby, and this was my mother's womb. The voice explained everything to me, told me that I was dreaming of the many ways my life might go, that as my consciousness began to develop, I was able to experience the mapping of my life, the many pathways I might choose, and that at any moment of my birth, all I had dreamt would slowly dissipate, until I would no longer remember it. This would happen long before I could talk, I cried out. I knew what I might become. Could I stop it? Could I choose a different way? If I could remember all of this, then I could. But even now, I felt the memories fading away. Even my grasp of understanding was reverting, and soon I would not be able to think as I think now. That all of this was made possible just so I could be created, that the mapping of my many-rooted life could be in place, and all that I had learned would soon be gone. A hospital ward, 10:32 p.m. An expectant mother screams with pain. The midwife calls out to the mother, "I can see the head now. Now you can push, push. There we are. A baby boy. Look, look. Doesn't he look cute?" The midwife holds the baby up and shows the mother, and takes the baby to the scales to weigh it. As the baby screams out as loud as it can, almost as if it was desperate to say something.